myself, so I haven't quite figured that out as maybe as key presenter. I'll have to kind of work on that, but I will echo the welcomes and thank yous to folks that have joined us. I'm going to show a little the agenda that we have planned for today. I'm going to start with introductions a little bit to today's session, some key questions, and then each of the participating campuses in cohort 1 will introduce themselves and answer the key questions that Amber and I pose. Then at about 12:20, we hope to have some time to really workshop your ideas, your questions. There's no wrong level of preparedness to bring to this session. We want you to be present and really think about the questions that we answer or that we pose to you, and then there will be all good answers, no wrong answers there. After we talk about prioritizing and partnering, we will move to thinking about sampling, recruitment, and messaging, which has been the bulk of the last couple months where our heads have been in this project. And then we'll again workshop those ideas. So I'm going to hand it over to Amber to introduce herself and pose this first question to us.
Hello, I'm Amber. I'm a rising third year in the clinical community psychology PhD program at the University of South Carolina currently. And Sharon and I met kind of serendipitously with this project and just our hopes to change campus climates as it comes to sexual assault. And so with this project specifically, and where I sort of came in was really the crux of this question of who should we prioritize in doing this work. Um, and so really who we want to prioritize when we think about this is, if you guys have worked with Sharon before, I'm sure you've seen this coin model. But on one side of the coin is privilege, on the other side is oppression. And a lot of the times at the bottom of that coin, of that oppression, are people who are experiencing unearned advantage or unearned disadvantage, excuse me. Um, and so those are really the people that we wanted to prioritize because oftentimes they're left in the margins. And so that might be people who are not male, people who are trans, people who are not white, lower class, not straight. And so this cohort 1 really wanted to prioritize one or more of the student groups on this side of the coin.
Great. So that is our guiding question number 1. And my name is Sharon Wasco. I am the, when you see TBA here, this is Taking Bold Action Project Director. And I'm posing a second question, which is with whom should we partner? And there's a couple levels. This is sort of a meta question within our project. It was initially the proposal that we submitted to ODHE that was approved, was proposed as a collaborative inquiry project. And what we found was and so that meant we were looking to create a cohort of an ideal number of campuses, and that ideal number was 12. And we were not able to enroll 12 campuses. And a lot of what we found were campuses wanted to do the work, but they could not find a partner, because part of what we asked is that we move beyond just working with the Title IX coordinator, that as we understand the way that sexual violence disproportionately harms some groups, those groups that Amber just pointed out that we sort of see on the bottom of that conceptual coin, that we wanted the Title IX coordinator to also work with another person on campus. And so we shifted our way of thinking about this project. It was no longer appropriate for collaborative inquiry, and I was happen to be reading this book, Emergent Strategy, and you'll see the principles there that have really guided the work that we've done. So I am fully here to say working with 3 campuses over 12 is good. I mean, it was really wonderful to have the opportunity to work at a deeper level with 3 campuses. So one of the emergent strategy principles at the top there is small is good, small is all. Um, it is also really important as those campuses who were unable to truly enroll, and there were many folks who said, we want to do this, it's just our DEI coordinator is leaving, or we're having turnover, we don't have that critical relationship, and we wouldn't be doing it with the intention we wanted if we didn't have that partner on board. So I just want to support being honest and recognizing those pieces. Where you are on your own campus with some of those things. We did ask every one of our campuses to partner with 1 or more employees whose paid work included supporting priority groups, and I'm really excited to have our campuses share with you how they did that. So I will go ahead then and have each of my co-facilitators who represent the 3 cohort 1 campuses introduce themselves, talk about the people that were involved. Those will be the names of people in your ecosystem here in Ohio. If you're participating on our call today, you're likely a paid employee at another campus. So you'll recognize some of the names. I'm going to have each campus talk about their priority groups and then the partners. So I will toss the mic over to Molly at Neomed to start us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Molly O'Malley. I am the Associate Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and also the Title IX Coordinator at Northeast Ohio Medical University. So luckily for me, I do the DEI work plus the Title IX work. And my job is really the overarching campus DEI work. So I support the individual DEI groups in each of our colleges. So we did partner with the DEI team in our College of Medicine, also the DEI team in our College of Pharmacy, for this to send out those reminders and reminding students to take the survey. We selected our priority groups. My office and the offices in each of the colleges support the underrepresented in medicine, or URIM students, and those are our Black and Latinx students. One thing that our campus succeeded in doing is we went from a 3% URIM student enrollment to a 36% URIM enrollment in 1 year. So those pose different challenges for us, being a school that grew in a population that was so small before, and making sure that we were supporting students and the different type of students that we now had on campus. So that's how we selected our priority groups.
Great. Thank you, Molly. I'm going to invite Anne to bring your voice into the space here and tell us about the people priority groups and partners at Ohio University.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. My name is Anne Brandon. I'm the Associate Director of Prevention and Education at Ohio University. And we had all kinds of great people in our little group of professionals here. We worked with Carrie Griffin, who is our Director and Title IX Coordinator, and also Director of University Equity and Civil Rights Compliance. We had Dr. Dwayne Bruce, who is the Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Paige Klatt, who works here in the Office of Health Promotion with me. She's the Assistant Director of Prevention Education. Diana Johnson Ward, who's a Wellbeing Support Manager and fully submerged in Black femme mental health and physical well-being groups. And also Taylor Bauer, who again is someone who was affiliated and emerged in our LGBTQI plus population. So our priority groups, we kind of had a twofold. Number one priority was multicultural students and LGBTQ plus students as well. So it was kind of a 2-tiered approach. And our partners were awesome, was the D&I Office of and then also the Office of Multicultural Student Access and Retention, the LGBT Office, priority student groups who were specific affinity groups, and some of our peer educators as well. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Anne. Bill, I'll invite you to share your voice and your experiences with the people, priority groups, and partners that took up using data to drive action at Antioch College.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Bill Fox. A new vice president for student affairs and dean of students at Antioch College in Yellow Springs. I loved that small is good quote earlier, because we are about 116 students. So our experience may be slightly different or very different from where you're situated. I would say I'm 6 months in, and so we were just super excited to partner with everyone on the survey to get a really good baseline, since 2 years ago our climate survey, really right in March before COVID hit, had only 13 people. So really thrilled that we hit our target and well above that. And I think that had a lot to do with the people that we involved and got connected to the effort. So sorry, it's not on this slide, but it's on the one that I'm looking at. So I will read Hannah Montgomery, who's our Officer for Institutional Effectiveness, who has been at Antioch for quite some time and knows all the tricks to increase response rates, was present. Ariella Brown, who's our Title IX and Gender Equity Officer, participated throughout. Shadia Alvarez, who is the Executive Director of our Coretta Scott King Center and our Institutional Officer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Myself as the Dean of Students, and also our thought partners of faculty, staff, and students on our Community Council. That's our major governing body with some subcommittees. And so we made sure that at those meetings, we engaged those populations to make sure that they knew what was happening and why it was happening and how they might be able to help us recruit participants. I would say our focus was on our LGBTQ plus population, but also our DEI officer certainly helped us understand the intersectionality that is present in a survey such as this. So we're anxious to hear the results and make sense of that together as a team. But something about Antioch that you might not know: in our first year class, we're seeing 70 to 80% of our incoming class identify as LGBTQ. And so that population in particular is important, as always at Antioch, has always been, but making sure that we hear their voice in these surveys was critical. And I'll talk later about the good news in terms of response rate.
Wonderful. Thank you all. So we want to have you reflect, absorb a little bit in hearing how these campuses responded to the questions, and take about 5 minutes to think about these questions for you. And so we will invite everyone in the workshop after 5 minutes to introduce yourself and maybe give a couple sort of hypothetical answers, or if you're thinking about joining cohort 2, like who would you really want to do this work on? So after 5 minutes, I will go around, and it looks like I can see most people on the screen. I'll ask you to volunteer. I'm probably don't know who everyone is, but I may call on you to share with us what you're thinking. So these are the questions. I will start some time so you can kind of think about that and how you want to share back with the group. And I'm going to put on, this is what these are some additional ways to think about this. So when you do come back, it's going to be your chance to introduce yourself, and sort of like our cohort 1 did, we want to have you also share on your campus one group you think you could pay better attention to in your data use prevention and support practices, one partner that you can think of on campus that could help you in prioritizing that group, and if you like, a challenge that you might face in actualizing these attentions. So we'll take a little break. I'm going to use my time to figure out how to use the mute and get my camera turned on and off so I can see if I can figure that out. And I'll call us back in about 3 minutes now. Okay, everyone, I see that some folks have started to put some content into the chat, and it looks like Robin in particular is in a meeting where she's going to write into the chat. So I can start by reading Robin's, and then Brandy, it looks like you have some thoughts in there too. So I may invite you, if you can, to unmute yourself and let us hear your voice on these topics too. Before I start with Robin's comments, is there anybody else that would like to introduce themselves? So we can do, again, your name, your campus, your title there, and then the answers to a couple of these questions.
Hi, my name is Andrea Goings, and I am the HR Director and Title IX Coordinator at Rhodes State College. I'm really just kind of excited to listen today to everything that the cohort group has been doing. I would say that the partner that would help in prioritizing, I'm going to skip around a little bit, would be somebody in our student activities that I thought was going to try to join today, but I think she got pulled into something else. So they're a little closer in contact with our students and the surveys and stuff. However, I think a group that we could pay better attention to, if I asked them, would probably be our LGBTQ+ community. I think we started to. But I think that's probably one. And as far as the actual challenges, I think just being that this isn't specific maybe to this group in general, but just being that we are a community college, so we don't have residential. So there's a lot of students in and out, not always here where you can physically talk to people as much or go to group settings. Sometimes is a challenge. So, but I'm excited to hear everybody's pieces today.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to go ahead and read Robin's comments, and then if there's other folks that are ready to respond after that. So Robin Schreck is Director of Student Conduct and Deputy Title IX at Wittenberg University. And they say our director of the McLean Center Diversity Center, that would be a, oh wait, I'm skipping around here. Kind of like you did, Andrea. I'd say one group is our Black student population, and then a partner would be the director of the McLean Center Diversity Center. And a challenge is that our director of McLean Center is pulled in every direction and committee and might be hard to get action items done. Yes, that is definitely a challenge for sure. So thank you to Andrea and Robin for sharing. Brandy, are you able to share your, or anybody else?
Yes, I'm sorry. I came in a little bit late, and Carrie had messaged me privately and said that it was a pause and reflect time. So I apologize for just jumping into the chat. So I'm Brandy Reeves Doyle. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director in the Student Wellness Center at the University of Cincinnati. When I think about kind of our data gathering and prevention in general, which is what my office focuses on, we don't do as much with like support and intervention. But graduate students, and then we have two regional campuses. So we're on kind of I hate to use the word main campus, but for lack of a better word, I'll say main campus. And then we have two regional campuses. So, trying to figure out how we can better work with our regional campuses in particular, as well as our graduate students. And we do have some partners on those regional campuses that, we've worked with in the past that have been really good partners. And so I think just figuring out how we can better, partner to do some of the prevention work on, those campuses. And then also, think about the data gathering that we do on those campuses. One of the challenges, and I can say, when I saw the title of this this webinar, I thought, oh, good, I can use this for our National College Health National College Health Assessment Survey, because we have a really hard time getting students to respond to that survey. And, you know, I won't go into our whole history of it, but we have also really struggled, you know, with participation on our regional campuses. And so, you know, trying to figure out how we can better implement surveys across all 3 campuses.
Great. Welcome and thank you, Brandy. Who else do we have participating that can introduce themselves?
Hi, my name is Danielle Bryan. I am a student success coach at Eastern Gateway Community College. My vice president, she had forwarded me on to this since she couldn't be here. But for us, we have a main campus. We're a community college. We do have a branch campus here in Youngstown, but our main population has been a growth in the online student population. So I would say the areas that we, you know, need to work better on is kind of a combination of our in-seat students and our online students. At the branch campus that I work at, we actually have a campus care center that we have created. We started it as a food pantry, and then from there we had worked to make partnerships like, you know, food services, like a career closet, just some other kind of opportunities that we were able then to move into a campus care center. As a individual who works with all the students, whether online or in person right now, I mean, we're losing that engagement and the needs of what we're kind of giving what we're giving to our in-seat students for our online student population. So we have students who online all over the United States who are saying, I'm struggling with, you know, food insecurities or housing insecurities. But how do we go and assist them without just giving them a listing of organizations that we had kind of come together to help them? So I would say for us, it's, you know, but then also making sure that we have the resources available. We still have a lot of students who have decided that they still feel uncomfortable coming back to campus, even if they are locally. So trying to get those students to re-engage on campus with our campus care centers, just to provide, you know, those opportunities, because we have the online students say, well, you have that for in-seat students, but it seems that in-seat students are not utilizing it to the best of the ability. So, and I would say for the mental health, trying to gauge that and try and help students feel that they can connect with someone about that as well.
Great. Well, we appreciate everybody sharing their names, their roles on campus, a little bit about the context, both the context of the structures of your institutions, then some of these layers and layers of other context that impacts the work that we're doing. I would like to say that I think that one opportunity that conducting these surveys provides an opportunity for is to start to create conversations with these partners that some of you have identified, and kind of gives you a place to kind of a starting point to engage around some of the more difficult issues, like as Danielle was talking, I was wondering like which of the priority groups within that online population might be extra challenged because of where they fall on the oppression coin. So this is very complex work that we do. I want to frame a little bit the next set of questions that get into sampling recruitment. We heard folks worried about response rates and completion rates, engagement with surveys, and it certainly has been a challenge for almost all of us. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we approached sampling recruitment and messaging within this small is all, really trying to focus in on just understanding perhaps one of the most vulnerable groups on campus. So we challenged people to think about goals that were reasonable For some, that was like you've heard Bill at Antioch say, like better than 13 surveys, right? So these goals are going to be specific to what you are trying to accomplish. But as we think about our priority groups, we really wanted to increase the number of folks within those priority groups to 30 or more, which is based on sort of the statistics that go behind really being able to do quantitative analysis, rely on a sample size of 30. It's kind of a magic number that comes from central limit theorem. We also encourage people to work towards a response rate of 30% or more. So that was our goals revolved around that, and people had multiple goals. The big question that we kind of addressed first was whether you would use a universal or a selective sampling strategy. So a universal strategy means you put the survey in front of every single person on campus and give them the opportunity to participate. A selective sampling strategy it could look a lot of different ways, but basically it could be like a random sample. In this case, again, really focusing on our priority groups, we tried to think about ways to find sub-samples within a bigger campus that would perhaps include more people within those priority groups. Once we addressed those two big questions, then it came down to more tactical decisions. What is it that you can do and say and offer in order to recruit participation? Which of the two main collector options with SurveyMonkey, all of these surveys are online using SurveyMonkey. So which of the two main options, which is a link or an email collector, would be best given those goals? Who can be your messenger? We know messenger matters, and what are the specific things you can say to get people to participate. So I want to again turn this back to our campus, our cohort 1 campus representative. So you've now met Molly, Ann, and Bill, and have them talk about how they answered these questions, and then we'll invite you in to think about it as well. So I will hand this to Molly. And the way these slides are set up is we talk about the what first, which is the goal and the sampling strategy. Then I'll do a little preview just on this one slide. Then we're going to look at the success. So we'll look at the results of what it was that you did. And then we'll have you talk about the why, which is that, or the how, the collector, messenger, and recruitment. So Molly, I hope that makes sense. If you have questions, I can kind of help you through the structure of this format, but we want to start with what was the goal and what was the sampling strategy that you selected. And then I'll click over to the results. We'll look at whether or not where the successes were, and then you can talk about how you got to the successes that you got to.
Thank you, Sharon. So our goal was completed surveys from 30 of our URIM students, which were our Black and Latinx students that we prioritized. We used a universal sampling strategy, so everyone got a notification that the survey was open, and we did that in multiple different ways. For the collector, this was so much fun. We had an issue with SurveyMonkey coming into our email inboxes when we tried to use the email collector. So we did just use a link, and we also provided QR codes on some of the things that we put out on flyers on campuses and things like that. I think one of the nice parts for my position is that I get FaceTime with our URIM students every other month. We do have meetings with them. So those students know me, they see me all the time. They did get personalized emails in addition to the emails that everyone else had. But I think that relationship that we had definitely helped some of our results. So when you're thinking about the people to bring on to partner with for this, people who get FaceTime with students definitely can help you out in that. So we did use the whole campus distribution emails to let everyone know it was open and a reminder emails. We put QR codes on flyers that we passed out in the spaces that students use on campus, our study rooms, some of our lounges and things like that. We did use incentives, gift card incentives and snack attack pack incentives. We have a campus newsletter called The Pulse, which comes into our email every morning. So we utilized the headlines in our Pulse email so that everyone got that email also, and then the targeted emails specifically to our URIM students. One of the things that we did for the targeted emails to our URIM students is we kind of laid out our goals and what they were. And if you want to switch to the next slide, so I have the correct information. We used our 2018 results to set our goals and let them know where we were. So in that targeted email, we said, our goal is 30. This is what we got from 2018. This is how many more I need at this point to reach that goal. So the next 6 people who complete the survey are going to receive a gift certificate or a snack attack. And one of the things that we did with the snack attack, just to be transparent, whoever won that, we did send them an email to let them know that they won, and made sure that we asked for any dietary needs or preferences to make sure that we weren't giving them something that they weren't going to utilize anyway, so that they knew that they had a choice. And was lucky for us that it was coming up on finals week when we picked the award winner, so that they had that for their studying and things like that. So we did end up with 41 students that identified as Black or Latinx. We didn't reach our goal of 30 in each group, but that's okay. We did receive 30 students who identified with the LGBTQ+ community, and we, if you see, our sample size was a lot better than it was in 2018, and our increase in response rates was 37%. So we did pretty well, but definitely the FaceTime with the students and the incentives definitely helped, because as soon as I sent those emails out that said the next 6 people to do this, we got those responses very quickly. So that definitely helped us out.
I want to hop in and underscore a few points, and I will probably do this on all the campuses, because with Small Is All, I was watching all these 3 campuses were under my constant supervision every day, like checking my nets, checking all the survey collectors to see how the responses were rolling in. And there's a couple things that I just want to underscore in what Molly said as you think about your own campus. So she mentioned that their director of communications and marketing had really limited her ability. She knew going into it, she was only going to be able to do 2 direct mail appeals. And again, using a universal sample approach, the nice thing about that was she was able to supplement those 2 sort of kind of the 2, I want to call them like her chips, like her 2 email, big emails. She then supplemented that with distributing the QRC code with paper. That was like, those were paper flyers that went out on the campus. And that is an approach that only works if you're doing a universal, you cannot do that approach with an email collector, and one of our next campuses will talk about that experience. I wanted to point that out and wanted to offer that, because I know as so many of our campuses have increased the amount of emailing that goes out because we're doing so much remote learning. I have found in my couple years of working with campuses that there's less and less opportunity to do the repeated emails that are very helpful in driving the response rates up. So if you use a link at the collector, this is the tactic. If you use a universal approach where everybody's invited into the survey, you can then send both the link as well as using the QRC that you could put those up on, bathroom stalls or whatever. So that is one of the ways that Molly was able to get the link out in front of lots of people. In terms of, again, what made it successful, I think the incentives that she described are, everybody kind of needs a little external something. So there is a lot there. I am going to let's see if I can forward. I'll put myself back on mute. I think our next campus is Ohio University. So Anne and Paige, if you want to comment, I'll get your
Sure.
slides up.
Yeah, hello again, everyone. I was really lucky to have, again, a great group of folks and partners, and especially Paige, who's here with us today, to work on the back end of the email list. Again, we had a selective 650 students. Our goals were about 90 students in general, so 30 multicultural, 30 students with disabilities. Again, wasn't a tier 1 priority group, and again, not that there is some succession or prioritize like list or relevance. We really did have that list was of 650 students were our multicultural emails. So again, that was our target. Our sampling strategy, again, we were given a list of 650 students who identified as multicultural. And we realized, going through that collector, it was just a link that we sent out to those emails from Paige Klatt's account. So we wanted it to come from Health Promotion. We had a few technical difficulties, so it did come from our assistant director's email specifically. So one of the things that we felt was really great is we did have an increase in response rates and completion rates. Before we did, in 2020, we did the universal strategy. So again, a bigger number, but yet with the sampling strategy, we did have higher numbers in a few categories. So we did reach our multi-ethnic or multicultural, multiracial identities. We did receive 32 students with disabilities, and we had 27 students identified with the LGBT plus community. We also had a incentive for everyone who completed the survey. So we did $5 coffee cards, which meant like you get anything up to $5 in the front room, which is a coffee shop. Basically, it's like a Starbucks. It actually kind of is a Starbucks. I shouldn't say it isn't. It is the Ohio University's version of Starbucks here in Baker Center. So I think that was a great opportunity because everybody got something. And then in our last push, we did include 2 raffle tickets for $25 gift cards. So there was multiple strategies, the multiple emails that went out to the selective groups. And then I think that last week we did a kind of like a ambassadorship where we're going to also target some folks who were student ambassadors in the communities that we're speaking about, and had them send the link to folks that were outside of the original email list, and our numbers just rose pretty rapidly after that. As we're thinking about doing this and some of the barriers, I don't know if you want to address that now, but really thinking of like, one, we wanted to do it during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but I think that that's good if we also don't have other surveys that were going on. And then also we started to bump into exam week and the last week of school. So some of those things, if we were to rethink that, that might be a good idea to maybe do it at the end of March, early into the first week of April. It might be a better idea. But again, we had lots of champions. We did repeated email reminders and those incentives as well, and it really pumped our numbers up in that last week. Anything else I might be missing?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you got everything.
Thanks, Paige.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Paige. As I did before, I just want to underscore some of the things that were really unique. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of this contrasting just so that you all can learn from the diversity of even within the smaller set of campuses that we had. Every campus was so unique. So Ohio University has a larger population compared to either Neomed or Antioch. So when Ohio University they're selective, very small, 650 students out of, I think it's like 11,000 is what's enrolled on their multiple campuses. So they really only looked at a small portion of their campus. And I know a lot of people sometimes think like, oh, is that okay? And within this project, that's absolutely okay. That's bringing our marginalized populations to the center and actually focusing just on them. And I just want to underscore that point because it was a unique piece of what happened at Ohio University. And if you are a larger campus with thousands and thousands of students, that is one really effective way to increase your response rates, especially within certain groups. So it's a strategy specifically called oversampling. And so that it was really fun to have the opportunity to greenhouse that project here with Ohio University and some of the bigger campuses. A lot of those community colleges have really large populations. Some of them don't. I know there's a range, but I think that this approach has promise in many places. What that quote literally bought Ohio University was the opportunity to offer $5 to everyone who participated. That is, if you've got 11,000 students on your campus, that becomes a huge budget to give $5 to everyone. But if you focus in on 650, it was something that was affordable to them. And I would like to just invite, there's so much to say about these campuses and what they did, and really hard to put it into this space, but both Neomed and Ohio University, in giving out their incentives, included on that incentives page an opportunity for students to self-select into a group of folks that would work to help analyze and put the results into action. So there is a little trick that you have to do to be able to get the incentives to people. You have to create a separate form to collect their name and email in order to get them either their entry into a raffle or their $5 coffee card. And they used that as an opportunity to also engage students in being not just data points, but potentially be data analysts as well. So that was really exciting. So I will stop there. We do have space and time here. I'm looking at our budget and we have plenty of time, so we may be able to do a little Q&A. I am going to have Bill talk a little bit about what happened at Antioch, and then we'll see where we want to go from there. So let me get your slides up and I'll hand it over to you, Bill.
Okay, great. And I will be quick, I promise, so we can get to that discussion. And I'm learning so much from the other campuses as we've had these conversations. I've got new ideas for next time. I would say yes. I mean, Sharon was great to say, let's shoot for the 30% response rate. Certainly that was more than the 13 we had in 2020 before everybody headed out for COVID. And at least 30 LGBTQ plus students. And we thought, given the intimacy of our campus and the relationships and students generally responding to reasonable asks of their time to give us good information, we thought that that was a reasonable goal. We did the universal sampling strategy where we did email our faculty, staff, and students the survey. That message came from me, and as we tried to increase completion rates, those messages to the populations that clicked on it but hadn't finished it were a little bit more nuanced. And toward the end, for those who had completed it, we went back to them to encourage a friend to complete it as well. So we did the email strategy. We didn't do too much. I thought, the inboxes were respected. I thought when we sent those out, it made sense and they were timely. We have weekly community meetings at Antioch. So every Tuesday at 2:30, we come together as an entire community. And so that gives me a space to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, and to ask for their engagement. And so that was effective for us to make time in that space to answer questions as needed about the survey and to say, we could do great things, moving forward into action if you take 5 minutes to 10 minutes now to give us really good feedback about your lived experience on campus. We can go to that next chart there. So yeah, as you can see, I think we're really proud to see more students in 2022 in the sample size. We are thrilled with an 84% increase percentage of students from LGBTQ plus community, landing us with 34. Again, that was our targeted population. Stayed about stable in terms of percentage of students of color. We have a 49% white campus. And of course, I think we could have done better there. So that's a lesson learned for us. But in terms of our outreach to our Queer Center student coordinator, they were certainly effective in helping us increase some numbers, as was the RA on our LGBTQ themed residence hall floor. Those were some key players in particular. I'd say timing was everything. Most campuses in April, it's a busy time and hard to capture student attention, but in April at Antioch was actually the perfect time for a few different reasons. One, we were on quarters or terms, so we had just actually started the spring, and so people had the energy. They weren't in finals, and it was a good period of time in those first few weeks. It was also when we do acknowledge, celebrate Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we had invited speakers during that month who we planted the seed of how important the survey was. One of them was a staff member who was really involved in our sexual offense prevention policy during their time here. As you might know, Antioch in 1991 was really the first in the nation to talk about affirmative consent and to move that ball forward. And doing this exquisitely well and being a national model is important to our students. And so anything we can do to revise the policy and the practice is important, and we use data to inform that approach, and they know that. And so we had a few kind of higher profile campus incidents you can read a little bit more on our website about, but that certainly had students attending to kind of the importance right now for everyone in the campus culture to be lending their voice to improvement in this space. And so that was particularly, important. We did not do incentives. I think I should probably say that, out loud. We hit those numbers, exceeded those targets without incentives. But what I would say to that is I intend at this community meeting that's coming up is to celebrate the community's success in doing this and drawing attention to the big win for the community. Also, the students who are working on these different working groups on our sexual offense prevention policy and our LGBTQ working group know that the data from the survey will be available to them in identifying some action items. And so there was a lot of interest in that space too, to have good data. I think I'll end there and see if Sharon, you have more things to fill in the gaps.
Thanks, Bill. So hopefully all of our workshop participants are getting a sense for how unique every campus is, and your campus is also unique, and we would love to have the participation of every campus in doing this. It really was a nice space to try to, in a bolder space, try some of these new things. I would underscore in the case of Antioch, a couple unique things there just to kind of draw a line under it so it stands out. Antioch, of the three that you've just heard from, was not only were they the only campus that did not use incentives, they did not use the link. They used an email. So that email collector, what it does is it generates a unique link for each participant based on their email. That allows us to collect information about click-through rates and open rates of the emails. The data gets collected anonymously, so there's no way to match what happens, but there's these two things that you can learn from. So on the email collector, we were able to see how many people were responding. And as Bill said, they have these whole community meetings where they would say, go back, make sure that you're opening this email that came from the Dean of Students. So again, using that leadership to really stress the importance of it. And we were able to see on the click-through rates that, like, I think it was 92% of the people opened their email, which is huge. Now, not everybody participated. And again, talking about affirmative consent, we want only people that want to participate should participate, but they were able to reach their goals. The other thing that was unique about Antioch is they gave the entire survey to their staff as well. So being their employees, so being a smaller community, there's at least as many or very similar amounts of employees as students. So in holding up a community culture, it was really important to Antioch to also hear from their employees. So they had all the same questions, and they included extra questions about bystander intervention and some things. So they had a longer survey. So those completion rates in my mind are really big wins that need to be celebrated because it was, of the three campuses that we did, it was the longest survey, and they really did a pretty good job in increasing their response and completion rates. The last thing I'll say about all three of these, and then we can go to give you about 5 minutes to think about your campus. And then when we come back, either you can ask questions or tell us where you're at. I want to use the space kind of emergently. But the last thing I wanted to say about all three campuses, oh my gosh, I lost it. Oh, this is what it was. So no matter what the sampling strategy was, no matter whether they selected universal or selective, tactically you do multiple things. So while in the case of Antioch, since that's up, I'll talk about them. While that was an email collector, they were able to meet in those weekly meetings and in person, face to face, say, hey, check your email box for this. You should be looking for it. It has my name on it. Here's how to find it. Go back and look at it. And then we did do a couple reminders, but not so many. At Ohio University, Ann and Paige had this great idea of, let's get some student champions to push the link out and say, hey, I've taken the survey, I hope that you'll do it too. So and then at Neomed, I think Molly mentioned how she used the QRC codes. So tactically it's always like multiple modalities that you're supplementing one way or another. So it really allows you to be creative and think about what are the ways you can come up with multiple messaging opportunities. So according to my schedule, we were going to end this section at about 1:05, and it's 1:03. So I think we're really good on time. If there are any questions right now before we go into a little time and space for you to think about questions as workshop participants, this would be a great time to ask questions of our facilitators. See if I can open up the chat box if there were any questions that you wanted to put in the chat. Okay, so let's go ahead then. And I did want to throw this last thing up. Just in addition to some of the other things that I do, one of my volunteer things I'm very passionate about is upholding democracy and protecting, making sure that people vote. And so I serve as a Summit County poll worker here in Ohio. And we just had on May 3rd a big election, or yes, it was a general election. And in our community, we were voting on a school levy increase. And there were, we talk about multiple modes of getting people to do something. There were yard signs, there were direct mailers. We had, primary, gubernatorial candidates like knocking on doors. There was so much messaging, right? In a pretty big thing, making decisions that really affect, the quality of our schools in the town that I live in, which is Hudson, Ohio, where the schools are like the crown gem. And given all of that, the voter turnout was still only 20.6%. So when we talk about 30%, or as some of these campuses did, 43% turnout rates, this is engagement. I mean, in the current state of all of us with social media having reduced our attention span, a 30% response rate is pretty good. And, again, just wanted to point out that this year's, at the same time that my campus cohort folks were out there collecting data, I was working on some local election stuff. And in most cases, they kind of did better than we did here in our local town for elections. So yes, lots to celebrate. Questions for you, and I'll put another 5 minutes on the clock. Hopefully you've had lots of light bulbs going off in your own minds as our co-facilitators have shared. I'd like to dedicate some specific time, about 5 minutes, for you to think about these questions. What would be your goals for survey participation? Who would you want to hear from? What would be the numbers that would be important to you? Is it better than last year? Is it 30 of a certain group? Think about that. And then think a little bit about the tactics that would work on your campus. Where are your limitations? Where are the in terms of budget or the ability that you have to communicate? Think about these questions. And then when we come back, this is sort of what we want you to tell us. A goal that could be achievable at your campus, a messenger that you think would be compelling, one message that could provide intrinsic motivation, one incentive that might provide extrinsic motivation. So I'm going to set my timer now and we will reconvene. And the rest of our time until 1:30 will be dedicated to hearing back and kind of workshopping ideas. as people continue to think, I'm going to go ahead and answer a question that came from Robin about what is Messenger? What do we mean by that? And some of these decisions get really nitty gritty when you're getting into putting out the surveys. So one of them is either way that you do it, whether you use the email collector or you send out the URL, there has to be a from email address. And who is it that that email address is going to be from that is going to cause someone to open that email? So we all decided that we didn't want it to say from sharon.wasco@gmail.com, that was nobody was going to recognize me, but who would be the email address, who carries weight, who has authority, who is approachable, recognizable. So that's a very little minute level. You could also think about it as if you were going to make a flyer and you were going to co-brand, like take our survey, what would be the departments that you would want co-branded on there? Who is running the survey as you go out to your campuses and ask them to participate in this? Who are you, who is it coming from? Who is the ask coming from? So it's been about 5 minutes. We could definitely, I would like to invite our respondents, our participants into the space to just either in the chat box or unmute yourself and join us to share one or more of these questions that you've responded to, one or more. Maybe you can't phrase it as an answer to one of these questions, but it's raised a question for you about your own campus. I'd like to open it up to anyone to start us off. And believe me, I'm biting my own tongue because I've written down 3 more things I want to say if there is the time to say it, but this is really your time. What can we talk about? What about this is exciting to you? What are some goals that you might be able to achieve on your campus with this work? What are some of the kinds of extrinsic incentives? If budget wasn't an issue, if you could do it as a dream, what do you think students would participate for? What is reasonable? Living in the real world, any one of these questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Sharon, I was thinking of something, and I don't want to move too far from what because, since we were a campus that did this, I don't want to move too far away from what you're asked right here. I think also, like, what are the benefits of doing this type of approach? Because I think that folks who may already have limited resources in the data to action planning. So for us, and especially me in my first year, I want to collect data that we don't have. And I feel like, answering these questions in the back end is why is this data important to collect too? And again, that question is very, thinking about these spaces are important of like the incentives and the messaging, the goals, their partners. Why would you want to do it is because we do have Eurocentric surveying, climate surveying and spaces. We've had data and we're moving it into action. For me, I want to know an approach that is actually a community level prevention approach. And a public health approach, which is focusing on priority groups. So I don't know if that's helpful, or if it takes us off the path here of what you're trying to generate, like in these thoughts, but that's just something I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Anne. That's exactly two of my comments were come around to answering this question. So the two things that I want to say, I'll just say them now, and then it looks like we have some questions popping into the chat, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes. 100%. So why would you do all this? Why does it matter? And what I strongly believe from the minute I found community psychology as my calling is that if you focus on your priority populations, if you bring those for whom the harm is disproportionately affecting the most to the center and build your practices to serve the needs of those people, you end up creating so many ripple effects of benefits that you probably couldn't even have anticipated. So we see that part of what's so exciting about sharing back with you all is to provide all of this as a case study of how partnering, prioritizing, taking an anti-oppression approach, we're calling this about action, right? Like not just focusing on the data, but knowing that this is going to guide action at the end. Another thing people didn't say at every one of these campuses, each of the folks that you've talked to shared these in the survey form while they were still questions, shared them back to students and employees on their campus. So engaging at that deep level with that community, with that group that you're prioritizing, really does create these benefits and this value. So answering these questions of what your goal is and how you get there is really important. But what I wanted to say is that by focusing on priority populations at Antioch College, at Ohio University, at Neomed, we were able in each one of those cases to increase their overall response rates, their overall ability to answer questions about how sexual misconduct affects students on their campus in really important ways. So that's one thing. The second thing I kind of wanted to say about the benefit of doing it this way, again, thinking meta level, we're partnered within a cohort, and we have not yet entertained the affirmative consent kind of conversations I want to have about whose data, how's data, how do we share data. But one of the nice things about working within a cohort is while some of these sample sizes might seem really small, like, oh, only 27 from this certain group, or I think Molly pointed out, like, even though it was 20% more than they had 2 years ago, it was still only 20% Black students, or I don't have the exact details, but those numbers seem small. But one of the things we've talked about is creating a data set that pools all the data so we can really look at intersectionality. So for at Antioch, where they focused on LGBTQ students, some of those students also are identify with racial minorities. At Ohio University, where they focused on racial minorities, some of those students also have LGBTQ identities. So we can really understand intersectionality by pooling data. So yes, why would you want to do this? The kinds of values. So absolutely, Anne. Other thoughts? I don't know, Amber, if there's anything you wanted to add in, and then anyone else that wants to unmute to share.
I know that Brandy had a request to be or to contribute as she put something in the chat, but I'm trying to unmute her from my end real quick just to see if she.
Oh, sorry.
Nope. Okay, good.
Thank you. Yeah, I had just put in the chat. I've been thinking about the question from earlier about the challenges, and I feel like we have a lot of challenges. One of which is that I had put in the chat is that we have to offer the same incentive to every single participant. So we can't do like a random drawing for a bigger, prize, which is, obviously very limiting. And so I really like that idea that OU had talked about with like kind of having like a really good incentive of $5, which, you know, might not seem like that great, but I think students really get excited, especially if it's like Starbucks or Amazon or something. And then just inviting fewer students and trying to be really kind of intentional about, you know, the students who are invited. So I really like that thought, and definitely I'm going to keep that in mind in the future.
Thank you, Brandy. I do not want to fill up the space, but I just have to respond to that, and then I'm going to try to be a little quieter. But yes, that is a benefit. And so if you can find your priority populations and really think about a way to center them and say the first 100, you know, send it out to them first using like an email list, like as Molly or Anne had, that's a way to keep your population smaller. You can also do a random selection, which in terms of methodology is actually quite a rigorous method, would be to take a random sample from a larger population and still say that the first 100 will receive XYZ, whatever, $5. You know, I think you're right. People like $5. Who else has what about messengers or anything else? But I would be curious as to messengers that would be compelling on various campuses. I see Robin entering into the chat box to say, in terms of Messenger, utilizing our concerned Black student group. So if you have a priority population of Black students, then definitely going to those student groups and finding ways to engage them in crafting the message. And one point I would say to that is, you know, don't come to that group when everything is fully baked and then ask them to participate. Bring them in at the beginning so that they can be part of saying, well, we have a problem right away with the way you phrased question one, which I wish I could remember the exact example of it, but we got really interesting feedback on some of the language from the LGBTQ questions. Oh, I know what it was, like understanding that romantic attraction and sexual orientation are actually two different dimensions, and being careful in how you conflate those terms or using them together in meaningful ways. So I like that idea. Who else has anything to share about this exciting work?
Sharon, I was just going to add kind of quickly that, you know, one of the lessons learned, although we had a good outcome, our time working on the project was really just 2 months. And because we joined late, we joined the cluster late. So the fact that everyone is on this call thinking forward is, you know, a great sign. And I think, of course, we could have done more through a longer process of engaging the communities, and you know, from you know, reviewing the questions that we were going to ask on the survey to the messaging and communication. But really it was, you know, the flip side is you can do it even on a truncated schedule. So I think we first made contact on February 8th, and our launch party for the survey was on April 18th. So a little bit more than 2 months.
Thank you, Bill. That does sort of lead me to this next step for our cohort. It's nice to have everyone in the same space. It's April. I mean, the race to the end of the semester is always so busy for all of us in academia and elsewhere. So some of my cohort campuses may be hearing this for the first time, but in May and June, we are analyzing data, writing reports. Amber and I have started that work and doing meaning making. So what's going to happen next and what would happen in both cohorts is that each participating campus will bring their team together to have an individualized session doing meaning making just on their campus with Amber and myself. And then we'll start to think about bringing the 3 campuses together across the cohort to also share back, develop data stories, and think about the actionable findings, i.e. what of these things that we're learning have implications for action we can take to better the lives and opportunities for students in our priority groups. And then in July, the new fiscal year starts. And so we are officially going to be open to start entertaining cohort 2 applicants, inviting people to fill out the enrollment forms. And the idea would be looking out to the end of this academic year that we would ideally enroll up to 12 campuses to be able to do these 2 cohort meetings before we start rolling out the surveys. So as Bill mentioned, he came on late. One of the things that we kind of did at the front end was think about, you know, what questions do we want to include on the survey. We kind of talked about some of the survey development in those original cohort meetings. And so what cohort 2 looks like is TBD, depending on who comes on board. All of our cohort 1 campuses will be invited to remain engaged at whatever level they're able to give with the second cohort. So there will be, we will be sending out some additional messaging on how to participate in that. And if you are not able to participate at that level, one of the nice opportunities that Carrie has carved out for us is to create some resource documents, like a how-to guide. We're going to be compiling all of this in an online kind of toolkit place where you can watch the various sessions that we've recorded, look at the survey items themselves. You know, we'll think about what we can continue to add on there, but there will be resources available to you to review the foundational documents that we used in creating the work, the surveys, the how-to guide, and then these recorded sessions. And that's bringing us to about time. I would like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, committing to continuing to think about doing better for these priority groups on our campuses, sharing your energy with us today.
Well, thank you to Sharon and Amber, as well as Molly and Bill and Anne, for sharing their experiences and their work that they have been doing, and being so brave to be a part of this first cohort, and to lead this charge, especially from Sharon and Amber's standpoint. And so I just really want to say that I appreciate all of you and the work that you are doing and the priorities that you're placing in your campus communities. And the support that's being given through our talented subject matter experts here when it comes to the data collection in this area. And then for those of you who joined us today, so glad to have each of you here indicating your interest in trying to learn more so that you can increase your data collection efforts and focusing hopefully on those priority groups moving forward. So if there are any additional questions, I will open the floor for that. Otherwise, thank you again for being here today. We so appreciate it.